I built a house on my parents' land. $200,000. 10 years. They said, it will be yours. Then they tried to give it to my brother. Update. My parents are trying to steal the house I built on their land. I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do. My hands are shaking as I type. I just got home from work to find an envelope taped to my front door, the front door I installed myself, by the way, and inside was a letter from a law firm I've never heard of. The letter informs me that I'm illegally occupying property belonging to my parents and demands I vacate within 30 days or face formal eviction proceedings. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the porch steps, the same steps I poured concrete for on a sweltering July weekend 8 years ago, and I just sat there, staring at nothing. This is my house. I built it. I paid for it. Every nail, every beam, every tile. $200,000 of my own money over 10 years. My wife came out when she heard my truck pull up, saw me on the steps, and asked what was wrong. I handed her the letter. She read it twice, then looked at me like I just told her someone died. They can't do this, she said. Can they? I don't know anymore. I don't know anything anymore. Let me back up, because none of this will make sense without context. 10 years ago, I was 26 years old, fresh out of trade school, working as an electrician. I'd saved up about $30,000, every penny I had, and I was looking at the rental market with growing desperation. Everything was too expensive. I was living in a cramped studio apartment, eating ramen 3 nights a week, trying to figure out how I'd ever get ahead. That's when my parents made me an offer. They owned 5 acres of land outside town, had owned it for 30 years. The front 2 acres had their house on it, but the back 3 were undeveloped. Just trees and wild grass and potential. Build a house on the back acre, my dad said over dinner one night. It'll be yours. We'll transfer the deed to you when you're ready, once you're established. My mom nodded along, smiling. We want to help you get started. Family helps family. I remember the exact feeling in my chest, this swelling of gratitude and hope. My parents weren't rich, but they had this land, and they wanted to share it with me. They wanted to give me a foundation. Are you serious? I asked. Of course, my dad said. That land's just sitting there. You're our son. Build something. Make it yours. I should have gotten it in writing. I know that now. I've heard it from everyone. My lawyer, my friends, the internet. Get it in writing. But you have to understand, these were my parents. I'd known them my entire life. My dad taught me how to change a tire, how to wire a light fixture, how to shake hands like a man. My mom made me soup when I was sick and came to every single one of my school events. They weren't strangers. They weren't business partners. They were my parents. So when my dad said, we'll transfer the deed when you're ready, I believed him. When my mom said, family helps family, I believed her. I didn't ask for a contract. I didn't consult a lawyer. I just said thank you, and I started planning. The building process took years. I couldn't afford to do it all at once, so I did it in stages. Year 1, I cleared the land, got the permits, poured the foundation. $25,000. Year 2, framing, roofing, basic structure. $35,000, plus countless weekends of my own labor. Year 3, electrical, did it myself, I'm licensed. Plumbing, hired that out. HVAC. $40,000. Years 4 and 5, interior walls, insulation, drywall, flooring. $30,000. Years 6 and 7, kitchen, bathrooms, fixtures, paint. $35,000. Years 8, 9, and 10, finishing touches. Landscaping. The deck. The garage. The workshop out back. $35,000. Total investment, just over $200,000. Every permit was in my name. Every utility bill came to me. I paid the property taxes on that portion of the land. My parents and I had an informal agreement that I'd cover the taxes since I was using it. But the land deed, it stayed in their names. Every year or 2, I'd mention it. Hey Dad, should we look into transferring the deed? Soon, he'd say. No rush. It's not like we're going anywhere. Mom, shouldn't we formalize this? Don't worry, honey. It's your house. Everyone knows it's your house. 10 years. $200,000. Every weekend for a decade. I built this house with my own hands. They said it would be mine. They lied. You need to understand something about my brother to understand what's happening now. He's 4 years younger than me, 32 now. And he's always been different. Not worse, not better, just different in how my parents treated him. When I was 16, I got my first job bagging groceries. When my brother was 16, my parents said he needed to focus on school. When I moved out at 22, I paid my own rent. When my brother moved out at 24, my parents helped him with a down payment. When I struggled, I was told to figure it out. When my brother struggled, he got support. I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself that maybe my parents saw something in me, resilience, capability. Maybe they gave him more help because he needed more help. I was the strong one. I could handle things. But there's only so many times you can watch someone else get handed what you worked for before it starts to sting. My brother got married 5 years ago. Big wedding. My parents paid for most of it. He bought a house with his wife. My parents helped with the down payment. He had an easy life, relatively speaking. And now he's getting divorced. His wife is taking the house in the settlement. He'll be walking away with maybe $30,000 in cash and no place to live. Guess where my parents want him to move? My wife and I were having dinner 2 weeks ago when my parents showed up unannounced. That itself was unusual. They usually called first. "We need to talk," my dad said as they walked in. His face was stone. My mom wouldn't make eye contact. We sat in the living room with the hardwood floors I installed by hand, the fireplace I built from reclaimed brick, the windows I spent $8,000 on because my wife loves natural light. "Your brother is going through a hard time," my dad began. "I know. We've talked. I offered to help him find an apartment." "He doesn't need an apartment," my mom interrupted. "He needs a house." I felt my stomach drop. I knew, in that moment, where this was going. "We've discussed it," my dad continued. "This land has always been ours. We let you build here as a favor, but legally, what's built on our land belongs to us." "That's not." "Let me finish." He held up a hand. The same hand that guided mine when I was learning to hammer nails as a kid. "We're giving this house to your brother. He needs it more than you do. You can take your furniture, your personal things. But the house stays. It's on our land." I couldn't speak. I literally couldn't form words. My wife found them for me. "You can't be serious." "We're very serious," my mom said. "And frankly, this shouldn't be a surprise. You've been living here for years without paying rent. You've had plenty of benefit from this arrangement. Without paying, I had to stop myself. I was shaking. I paid for everything. Every board. Every nail. Every wire. I paid the property taxes. I got the permits. I built this house. On our land," my dad said calmly. "I'm sorry you're upset, but the law is clear. You have 30 days. They left. My wife and I sat in silence for what felt like hours. "They can't do this," she kept saying. "They can't." But I remembered something from my business law class, years ago. Something about improvements on land. Something about ownership transferring automatically to the landowner. I have permits in my name. Utility bills in my name. Tax records showing I paid for construction. But the land deed is theirs. And they're using that to steal my house. Update 1. I hired a lawyer. It took me 3 days to find a real estate attorney willing to take my case. The first 2 I called listened to my situation and told me, essentially, that I was probably out of luck. "Verbal agreements for real property are very difficult to enforce," one said. "Improvements on someone else's land typically become the property of the landowner," said another. But the third lawyer, an older woman with 30 years of experience in property disputes, heard my story and said something different. "This is complicated," she said. "But complicated doesn't mean hopeless. Come into my office." I went in the next day. I brought every document I had, 10 years of permits, tax records, receipts, bank statements, utility bills. I brought photos from every stage of construction. I brought my own written timeline, reconstructed from memory and old calendar entries. She spent 2 hours going through everything. "You might have a claim," she said finally. "Several claims, actually." She explained it to me like this. First, there's something called detrimental reliance, or promissory estoppel. When someone makes a promise, and you reasonably rely on that promise to your significant detriment, the courts can sometimes enforce that promise even without a written contract. My parents promised me the land. I relied on that promise by investing $200,000 and 10 years of labor. That reliance was clearly detrimental if they're now reneging. Second, there's the concept of equitable ownership. Even though the legal title is in my parents' names, all the permits, all the construction, all the maintenance has been done by me as if I owned the property. The courts might recognize me as the equitable owner based on my conduct and investment. Third, and this was the one that made my lawyer smile, there's something called unjust enrichment. My parents would receive a massive windfall, a $200,000 plus house, without paying anything for it. The law generally frowns upon one party being enriched at another's expense without compensation. Here's the bad news, she said. Even with all of this, litigation could take years. It'll be expensive. We're talking tens of thousands in legal fees. And the outcome isn't guaranteed. What's the alternative? Negotiate. Your parents clearly want this to go away quietly. They hired a lawyer to send a scary letter, hoping you'd just leave. But if you push back with legitimate legal claims, they might be willing to deal. I went home and told my wife everything. What do you want to do? She asked. I looked around the living room. The fireplace I built. The floors I installed. The windows my wife picked out. The photos on the walls from our wedding, which we held in the backyard, under the oak tree I refused to cut down during construction because my wife thought it was beautiful. My wife is devastated. We got married in that house. We planted trees. We built a life. And my parents want us gone in 30 days so my brother can move in. I want to fight, I said. But I want to fight smart. Update 2. The family meeting. My lawyer sent a response to my parents' attorney. It was 12 pages long, outlining every legal claim I had, every piece of documentation, every argument we could make in court. The final paragraph was simple. Our client is prepared to pursue this matter through litigation if necessary. However, he is also open to negotiation to reach a fair resolution. Please advise. 3 days later, my parents called. We should meet, my dad said. As a family. Before the lawyers make this worse. My wife didn't want me to go alone. But I thought, maybe naively, that if we could just talk, person to person, something could be resolved. So I went to their house, by myself, on a Saturday morning. My brother was there. Of course he was. We sat in the living room, their living room, in the house I grew up in. The same room where, 10 years ago, they'd made me that promise. We don't want this to become a legal battle, my mom started. We're family. You sent me an eviction letter through a lawyer, I said. You made it legal. Because you weren't listening to reason, my dad said. We've explained this. The house is on our land. Your brother needs a place to live. This is the practical solution. The practical solution is to steal $200,000 from me? You're being dramatic. My brother finally spoke. You lived here for years without paying rent. You got free land to build on. You came out ahead. I stared at him. My little brother, who I used to play catch with. Who I taught to ride a bike. Who I helped move into his first apartment. I paid for everything, I said slowly. Every material. Every permit. Every utility bill. Every property tax payment. I didn't get free land. I got a promise that was never kept. Well, you should have gotten it in writing, my brother said with a shrug. They said, we'll transfer the deed soon. I trusted them. For 10 years I trusted them. I should have gotten it in writing. My dad leaned forward. Here's what we're proposing. You take your furniture, your appliances, whatever you bought that's removable. You leave the house, and we forget this whole thing. No lawsuits. No lawyers. We go back to being a family. You want me to give you a $200,000 house for free, I said. That's your proposal. It's our land. I'll see you in court. I left. Update 3. The discovery phase. My lawyer wasn't kidding about the process being complicated. Over the next 2 months, we went through formal discovery. My parents' attorney was forced to respond to requests for documents, and we submitted our own evidence. Some interesting things came out. First, my parents had talked to a real estate attorney 3 years ago, before any of this started, asking about how property improvements work when the land is in one name and the builder is in another. They knew this was a potential issue. They asked about it. And they still never transferred the deed. Second, I found emails from my mom to my aunt, from 6 years ago, where she explicitly called the house our son's house, and talked about how proud they were that I built it myself. Written acknowledgement that they considered it mine. Third, and this was the big one, my lawyer found a record of my dad's verbal testimony in an unrelated court case 4 years ago, a boundary dispute with a neighbor, where he stated under oath that the back acre is essentially my son's property. He built a house there and pays all the costs. Under oath. He said it under oath. My lawyer was practically gleeful. This is incredibly helpful. He's on record acknowledging your claim to the property. What does this mean? It means we have leverage. Real leverage. We filed our formal response, a claim for promissory estoppel, unjust enrichment, and equitable ownership. We also filed a motion to prevent my parents from taking any action against me, selling the property, renting it, transferring it, until the case was resolved. The judge granted the motion. My parents were furious. They called me. My dad was practically yelling, "You're tearing this family apart." "I'm protecting what's mine," I said. "You started this. I'm finishing it." Update 4. The mediation. 4 months into the legal battle, the court ordered mediation. All parties, me, my wife, my parents, my brother, all the lawyers, sat in a conference room with a retired judge acting as mediator. The tension was suffocating. The mediator had reviewed all the documents. He'd read the depositions, seen the evidence, studied the legal arguments. "I'll be frank," he said. "I've handled property disputes for 20 years, and this is one of the clearer cases of detrimental reliance I've seen. There's substantial evidence of an oral agreement. There's documented investment of over $200,000. There's a paper trail of the son acting as owner. And there's the father's prior testimony acknowledging the son's property interest." My parents' lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "If this goes to trial," the mediator continued, "there's a very strong possibility, I'd say probability, that the court will rule in the son's favor. The parents would be required to either transfer the property or compensate for the improvements at fair market value." "What's fair market value?" my dad asked. "Based on the assessment submitted, the house and improvements are worth approximately $380,000 in current condition. If you factor in the 10 years of property tax payments the son made, the cost of financing, and the opportunity cost of his investment, you're looking at somewhere between $400,000 and $450,000. My mom went pale. My brother never worked for anything in his life. Now he's getting divorced and needs a place. So they're taking my house, the one I built, and giving it to him. At least, they tried." The mediator looked at me. "What resolution would be acceptable to you?" I'd thought about this. A lot. Did I want the house? Part of me did. We'd built a life there. But part of me knew that even if I won, even if I got the deed, I'd be living on land owned by people who betrayed me. I'd have to see them. Deal with them. The property was adjacent to theirs. "I want to be made whole," I said. "I want $400,000. That covers my investment plus appreciation. I'll sign over any claim to the property and move." "That's absurd," my dad exploded. "We don't have that kind of money." "You have 5 acres of land," my lawyer said calmly. "Current assessment is $180,000 for the land alone, not counting improvements. You could sell a portion. You could take out a loan against it. You could mortgage the property. The entire point was to keep the land in the family." "Then perhaps," the mediator said, "you should have transferred a piece of it to your son when you promised to. Instead, you're in a situation where you might lose more than you would have." Update 5. Resolution. The mediation lasted 3 days, on and off. My parents tried every angle, claiming I agreed to rent-free in exchange for building, claiming I knew the land would never be transferred, claiming I was exaggerating my investment. None of it held up. My documentation was too thorough. My lawyer was too good. And my dad's prior testimony was damning. In the end, the mediator made a recommendation that both parties accepted, largely because the alternative, a trial, would have been even more expensive and the outcome even more uncertain for my parents. The settlement, $400,000. Paid in 2 installments, $200,000 immediately, $200,000 within 18 months. My parents would take out a home equity loan on their property to cover the first payment, and they'd either sell land or find other financing for the second. In exchange, I signed over any claim to the house and the land it sat on. But here's the thing about property law that my parents never considered. When you own a house, you own the improvements. The structure itself, yes. But fixtures, cabinets, appliances, removable items? Those were mine. I had receipts for everything. And fixtures is a complicated legal term. Before we finalized the agreement, my lawyer helped me inventory every single item in that house that was legally my personal property. Kitchen cabinets. I bought them as a separate item and installed them. They were mine. Light fixtures. Mine. The custom-built shelving in the garage. Mine. The workbench in the shop. Mine. The landscaping plants and trees I'd purchased and installed. Legally, mine. My wife and I spent 2 weeks removing everything. We worked methodically, carefully. We took out the kitchen cabinets and replaced them with nothing. We removed every light fixture, every ceiling fan, every custom piece I built. We left the structure. The walls, the floors, which were installed as part of the construction, not added later, lawyer's advice. The basic plumbing and electrical were integrated, so those stayed. But everything else? I rented 3 storage units. I filled them. When we finally left, the house was a shell. Working electricity, yes. Running water, yes. But no kitchen. No lights except the bare minimum required by code. No appliances. None of the built-in shelving. None of the custom work. My brother walked through the day after we moved out. My dad called me, screaming, "There's nothing here. You gutted the place." "I took my property," I said calmly. The agreement was clear. I signed over any claim to the real property, the house structure and the land. Everything else was personal property. I have receipts for every item I removed. This is, you can't. I can. I did. Have a nice day, Dad. Epilogue. My wife and I bought a house 3 months later. It's actually nicer than the one I built. Newer neighborhood, bigger lot, better schools nearby. We paid $320,000 cash and put the remaining $80,000 into renovations and savings. I took some of the custom pieces from storage, the shelving I built, some of the light fixtures, and installed them in our new place. It felt like bringing a piece of my work, my decade of effort, with me. Not the house, but my labor, my craft. My brother moved into the old house. From what I hear through extended family, he spent nearly $50,000 trying to make it livable, buying appliances, installing new cabinets, hiring contractors to do what I'd done myself. He doesn't have the skills I have. He's never built anything in his life. My parents had to sell one of their acres to pay me the second installment. They're furious about it. They've told extended family that I robbed them, that I took advantage of their generosity. Some relatives believe them. Some don't. I don't care anymore. There's this thing that happens when someone you trusted completely, someone who raised you, who taught you, who you loved unconditionally, reveals themselves to be someone capable of betraying you. It doesn't just hurt. It restructures your understanding of reality. Every memory gets re-examined. Every "I love you" gets questioned. Every good moment is shadowed by the knowledge that it could turn, at any moment, into this. I loved my parents. I trusted them. I believed, genuinely believed, that they wanted the best for me. And they did, until they wanted something else more. My therapist says I'm allowed to grieve the relationship, even while being proud of how I handled the situation. You can be sad and strong at the same time, she said. Those aren't contradictions. I'm trying. My wife and I are doing well. Our new house is starting to feel like home. We planted a tree in the backyard, a small oak, like the one at the old place. Maybe in 10 years it'll be big enough to hold a swing. They wanted to give my brother a free house. Instead, they paid me $400,000 and he got an empty box. Some lessons cost $400,000. I'm glad they learned it, not me. I still have the letter they sent, the eviction notice that started all of this. Sometimes I look at it, just to remember. To remind myself that trust should be verified. That love doesn't protect you from being used. That people can change, or maybe just reveal who they always were. I built a house once, with my own hands, on a promise that turned out to be worthless. Now I've built a life, a real one, on my own terms, on my own land, with my name on the deed. They can't take that. Thanks for reading. For anyone going through something similar, get it in writing. Always. No matter who's making the promise. I learned that lesson for $200,000, but at least I got my money back. Not everyone is that lucky. And if you're wondering, no, I don't talk to my parents anymore. They've tried to reach out, mostly to complain about the settlement or to guilt me about breaking up the family. I don't respond. Some relationships don't survive betrayal, and I've decided that's okay. My wife and I are planning a housewarming party for the new place. We're inviting people who actually care about us, friends, her family, the few extended relatives on my side who saw through my parents' story. It won't be as big as the house I built. But it's mine. Really, truly mine. That's worth everything. Here's what I learned about trust. Get it in writing. Always. No matter who's making the promise. I learned that lesson for $200,000, but at least I got my money back. 10 years. $200,000. Every weekend for a decade. I built this house with my own hands. They said it would be mine. They lied. I have permits in my name. Utility bills in my name. Tax records showing I paid for construction. But the land deed is theirs. And they're using that to steal my house. My brother never worked for anything in his life. Now he's getting divorced and needs a place. So they're taking my house, the one I built, and giving it to him. They said, we'll transfer the deed soon. I trusted them. For 10 years I trusted them. I should have gotten it in writing. My lawyer found evidence. My dad testified under OATH 4 years ago that the back acre is essentially my son's property. He acknowledged it in court. The mediator said, $400,000 or you'll lose in court. They paid. But here's what they forgot. I own everything removable. Kitchen cabinets, light fixtures, custom shelving, all mine. I took everything. My brother moved into an empty shell. Had to spend $50,000 making it livable. He doesn't have the skills I have. They wanted to give my brother a free house. Instead, they paid me $400,000 and he got an empty box. Some lessons cost $400,000. I'm glad they learned it, not me.